Welcome back, guys. This is a breaking news video. The FIDE World Cup has just been decided, and Javokhir Sindarov was able to clinch the title of 2025. The last game just concluded like 10 minutes ago. There was obviously the final between Sindarov and YE. Today was a tiebreak, and Sindarov was able to win the tiebreak in his favor, and therefore manages to win the World Cup this year. And I just wanted to make a quick video about this, which is probably going to be the final video about the FIDE World Cup. Probably there's going to be an opening idea video coming about that, where I summarize some of the best ideas. If you guys want that, let me know in the comment section. But in this video, I wanted to talk about, first of all, mostly about Sindarov's performance in this event, since he was able to win the tournament after all. So we will start with this view once again, where we will have a look at what was Sindarov's journey actually in this tournament. So here you see that his first opponent was Nikita Petrov, originally from Russia, but representing Montenegro now for, I think, 2 years or so, maybe even 3 years, where Sindarov was able to win by 1.5 to 0.5 in the classical portion. Also the same he managed to do against Nicolas Teodoro. He was also able to win that already in the classical portion. By the way, here you see my name. I was able to play against Yi here, which was also Sindarov's next opponent in the 4th round. For him, it was the 3rd round because the tournament favorites, like I think it's, I don't know how many, but like the top 30, 40, something like that, they start only from the 2nd round, so they don't need to play the 1st round, which was also the case for both Sindarov and Yi, for example. And they faced off in the 4th round, where Sindarov was able to win in the tiebreak. That was a pretty tough match, even though it was already decided in the first tiebreak. The game which Sindarov won actually went on for like 150 moves. It was some queen endgame with this extra pawn, which in practice is almost impossible to defend, and Sindarov was able to win that. In the next round, he faced off against Frederic Svane, who just previously before knocked out Gukesh and Shan Sargsyan, so obviously being in very good form. But Sindarov was also able to win that encounter already in the classical portion. I think he was able to win the first game there with the white pieces and didn't really let anything bad happen to him in the second game, if I recall correctly. Now, in the next round, he faced off against Martinez, which was quite a difficult match, which was also only decided in the second tiebreaks. When, first of all, the classical games ended quite calmly, both with draws. Martinez again showing his very solid playing style overall in this tournament, especially in the classical portion, but also in the rapid portion. He just was incredibly well prepared and chose his openings quite wisely, I would say. And especially if you're black against him, it was quite difficult. Like he plays the Alapin, for example, is very well prepared there, so it was very difficult to create winning chances against him if you're in this kind of must-win situation. I had the same problem against Yi. Like my strategy was never to lose a game, obviously, but once I did lose this one game in the tiebreaks, it was just incredibly difficult for me to create chances. The only game, I've said this already numerous times on my channel, the only game I was able to win against Yi was mostly because he was over pushing in that one, and there I managed to use my chances. But for a player like me, who is around 2500, I find it incredibly difficult to create chances against those players if they don't really go for it. And I need to work a lot on that to also create some chances against some super strong players like that. But I guess that's something anyone is struggling with. It's not just me to create chances against high-rated opponents. Anyway, Sindarov was then able to win the tiebreak against Martinez, which was quite difficult. Once Martinez even took the lead, and then Sindarov was just able to come back, and in the end he was able to decide that one for himself. Now, that was already now I think the semifinals, where he faced off against his compatriot Najdorf Yakuboev, which was probably quite unpleasant for them, because obviously both of them would like to go to the final, securing the spot to the candidates. But yeah, it was simply not possible. They got paired there, and Sindarov was able to win that in the tiebreak too. Then giving this nice gesture to sort of apologize to the opponent after he was able to beat him, and yeah, that placed him in the final already, which we see here. Hopefully you guys can see it. Yeah. So Sindarov played against Yi, and obviously for the third place was Yesipenko against Yakoboev. I would like to mention again Yesipenko, who lost on the previous day against Yi in this winning endgame sort of by blundering a rook in one move. I was incredibly impressed by his performance then in the match for the third place, because I mean, you're so close to having the ticket for sure already by winning the semifinal, and then to lose that and to come back as strongly as he did against Yakoboev, it was something which really, yeah, not many people I think could manage. Then to win 2-0 and in quite a clean way, I would even say, against Yakoboev, who is a very aggressive player, is something I really take my hat off before, because yeah, it's just such a huge psychological blow to lose like this in the tiebreaks against Yi. Must have been really terrible, and really hats off to Yesipenko for coming back like this. And now it's actually not updated yet, because as I said, the match just finished. Sindarov was able to win the tiebreak in actually the first tiebreak. He drew the first game with the white pieces, and then in the second game he was able to win. And that brings me to the final part of the video, where I would like to show you this final game which they played against each other. Actually, already in the first game, which ended in a draw, Sindarov did have one possibility to win in the end game, but didn't seize it, and then we arrived at the second game. I just want to talk about some of the most important moments. So the game started out with an Italian, which has become Yi's main weapon, I would say, nowadays. But apart from that, Yi is one of the players that is like 90% only going for e4. And Sindarov played the line with bishop e7, which is becoming quite more and more popular nowadays. Many people played that in the World Cup as well. Short castle, knight c3, now d6. Now black is threatening to go knight a5 to win the bishop pair. So Yi went a4. a3 is another option here, by the way. Some small differences with that. a4, of course, does weaken the b4 square a little bit, but on the other hand, white also gains some space on the queen side. Sindarov went for the line bishop g4, which also is more of a recent trend, because here black is simply giving up the bishop pair, which yeah, it does not look fully logical, but the computer does agree with this type of setup. Then just to go c6, put knight e6, queen c7, and rook d8. I actually quickly analyzed this line in one of my opening videos on the channel, where I mentioned that there is generally this quite interesting plan by going bishop e3, then queen f3, rook a e1, if I remember correctly, and then white can start pushing g3, h4, king g2. I analyzed some game by Mamedov on the channel. I'm sure you can find it. Maybe I will find it too, and put an info card here. So now we're gonna skip a couple of the moves. Later on, Yi took on e6 and went into this type of structure, but this is generally what black is then, I mean, not always, but often is kind of happy, because white gave up this powerful bishop on the long diagonal, and at least black will get the f-file. But obviously another thing is that the pawn on e5, and generally black's pawns on the e-file, are not really mobile, and especially the pawn on e5 can become weak. But here, Sindarov had a really good version with all of that, because with bishop d6 he can defend the pawn on e5 quite easily, and he's preparing to go rook f8 on the next move, which he also did, with some pressure on the f-file. And also the queen on h3 is attacking the pawn on e6, but not doing much more than that. And after the next move, bishop c3, Sindarov should have tried to use this with knight h7, because now he has some concrete ideas with knight g5. And then the queen is actually probably forced to go back somewhere here, because if the queen would go to g4, then rook f4 would actually trap the queen. So white would actually need to go bishop d2 back now, and here black has a couple of interesting ideas. Even rook f4 is possible here, with the idea that if white takes on f4, e takes f4, and then, well, the knight is hanging, knight g5 followed by f3 could come, so this is starting to look pretty dangerous. But Sindarov played d4, which was sort of criticized by the commentators Peter Lecko and also Jan Gustafsson, because now at least white is sort of safe here in the center, but still black is not worse here. The position now should be balanced, with both sides not really having such a huge plan what to do anymore. And Sindarov started to push on the queen side now with the move b5, which again was a little bit criticized by mostly Peter Lecko, because he is creating some weaknesses, and especially the a file is opening up. In the end, his fighting spirit here paid off, obviously, but there was one point later where YE actually had a great chance to play for a win. So now we're going to skip a couple of moves again. Sindarov played for c4. The pair of knights did get exchanged. And now this position is again balanced. Yeah, the c2 pawn obviously can be weak, but white can always defend it with either rook f2 or rook c1, and it's going to be difficult for black to attack it with all of his forces, because then something on the king side is going to happen. Queen g6 check or queen takes e6 once the black queen starts to move away from the king side. And here, after his last move, rook b7, this was an inaccuracy, because now YE really took the chance to play on the king side himself with f4. Black should have instead gone rook b2 immediately, and then either rook f2 or rook c1, and then f4 is going to be much more difficult to actually achieve. But after rook b7, now f4, e takes f4, and now e5. And now, since the bishop has to move, on the next move, YE can recapture with the rook. And all of a sudden, there are a lot of threats on the king side with the f-file opening up. Queen e8 was played, rook e to f2, rook a1, and here YE found a nice maneuver with queen f3. The idea to, first of all, attack the rook on b7, but secondly, trying to bring the queen to e4, pushing back the black's king a little bit further. So rook b1 was played, queen e4 check, king g8. And here was kind of the boiling point of the whole game, where YE did not take his chance and played the move g4, which is not great for a number of reasons, I would say. Well, computer still says that here white is equal, but now it really starts to shift. This is obviously not a criticism or anything. Like, there is immense pressure on the players, especially with seconds ticking down on their clock. I can speak from my own experience that in those tie breaks, some crazy things can just happen. Like, people just blunder. Like, it also happened to me to lose some completely drawish rook endgame. It happened to Yesipenko blundering a rook in one move. Especially if you're there for such a long time. The players are there for almost a month by now. And with all of this pressure, playing for the candidates, playing for the title, anything like that can happen. And even considering all of that, those two players really showed a great match overall. Still, YE had a chance here to play the move queen g6, which I've also considered while watching the live broadcast. But it's actually, well, it's sort of a logical move. But the f8 square is always protected, so you might even see that and then sort of stop, because e5 might be weak and f8 is still protected. But it simply turns out that black doesn't have any threats now, and white can even slowly try to bring the rook to c7, for example, and then the 8th rank is always going to be weak. And the d4 pawn can also be weak in the long run. And black will not really be in time to fully go after the c2 pawn. So after queen g6, also what you need to see is that queen c6 check doesn't really do anything, because now white can go king h3, and if rook h1 check, then king g4, and all of a sudden the king is actually very safe on g4, rook f7 is coming, and white is winning. But you also need to see that. Again, if we go back here, black can try rook g1, for example, give another check, and then rook h1 going after the e5 pawn. And here white can just sacrifice the pawn and go rook c7. This is what I said earlier. And now black is sort of bound to the passive defense with rook a8, defending checkmate by rook c8. And white still needs to be precise here, but generally white should be out of any danger here. Rook f4 is a very precise move, because you want to prepare rook c6 here. That was one idea, to Also try and go after the e6 pawn at the right time. And rook c6 immediately allowed black to equalize like this. Bishop f8 back, and now the d4 pawn is not attacked by the rook, so that's why it was important to start like this. And if black goes, for example, rook e8, then rook c6, and if h5, king h3, then bishop f8 doesn't work because you can take on d4. It's still not a simple win here by any means. I mean, black is a pawn up, and it's not so clear yet how white is actually gonna make progress. But the position is dangerous and objectively speaking, also clearly better for white. But in the game, Ye played g4, making space for his king on g3. But the downside is that also the king cannot escape to this g4 square anymore. So Sindarov played rook h1 now, attacking the bishop on h4, king g3, rook a to e1, rook e2, take, and now a fantastic practical idea at the very least is the move bishop e7, which was played by Sindarov. Computer even says that queen a4 might be a tad bit better. After bishop e7, it gives zeros, but white's only defense here is incredibly difficult to spot, especially with seconds on the clock. So white has to take, otherwise h4 is just falling. Bishop e7, queen takes e7. And you can actually use this as an exercise if you want to improve your calculation here. White has one chance here to save the draw. So if you want to try to solve it, you can stop the video now. I will reveal the solution. It was not played by Ye, obviously, who took on d4. And after queen h4 check, king f4, rook e1, white's king is just in pretty big danger, and white is immediately losing material. For example, queen g2 was played in the game, now queen g5 check, and white is just losing everything, at least the rook. But for example, if queen f3, even rook g1 would even win the queen on the spot. So now let's get back to this moment. White had to play the move king to g2 first, which I'm quite sure that Ye has thought about, because queen b7 doesn't do anything. White can just block the check with queen f3 or queen e4. But instead, I'm sure he was worried by queen h4, when it looks like there's no defense for threats like queen h3 or queen h2 or rook h2. But white has the fantastic resource rook f8 check. And king takes f8 is forced, otherwise if king h7, then queen e4 even gives checkmate. And here it turns out that white actually has this perpetual, because the queen can go to the a8 square. If king g8, queen a8 check, king h7, queen e4, and you have this way of having the perpetual. Still, even if you see that, you still need to figure out that after king e8, it's actually a perpetual. Like because if queen a8, then black could continue with queen d8. Even this, the computer said, is a draw. Well, actually, it's quite simple, because the rook on h1 is hanging. I forgot about that earlier, to be honest. So, well, I guess that the pawn endgames still are not okay, because black is the first one to pick up the pawn on e5. But how you can probably draw that is something like this. And if king e7, maybe you can even continue checking, because I don't know how this would be. This would be quite an interesting one. Maybe it's a draw, but yeah, probably it's a draw, because black, I guess, is not in time to run over there to b2. White is just gonna collect those pawns. Anyway, the simplest here after king e8 is just to give queen c6 check, and then it should be more of an easy repetition. But to spot all of that with seconds on the clock is really difficult. But I still thought it was a nice idea, this rook f8, so I wanted to show it to you guys. So that was the World Cup of this year. A special one for me, obviously. It was the second World Cup which I was able to participate in after Baku in 2023, where I got knocked out in the first round. And especially memorable because of the fact that I think I was able to give quite a good fight, knocking out the top player Lupulescu from Romania, strong 2600 player, and then delivering a pretty good fight against the Super Grandmaster not Ye, but Yuan Yi, is something I'm happy about and will certainly remember for some time at the very least. And it was, for me, very nice to watch this event. Some people also asked me like what I think about the World Cup format overall. And I always respond very positively to that. For the players, it's an incredibly stressful event because you never know like when you're gonna go home. You always have this pressure, especially with the tie breaks, that it's so nerve-wracking. But the main point, I believe, is that for the viewers, it's a fantastic format to watch, because first of all, there are always, at least at the start, there are many games you can follow, so you can basically always watch the event for the whole day, and it never gets boring because a lot of things are happening. And then you have the tie breaks where, yeah, I don't need to explain. It's just super exciting to watch that, because so many upsets are happening there. And generally, the upsets are also what makes what make the tournament exciting to watch. Like in this World Cup, we've never seen so many upsets before. Like we had Martinez, for example, knocking out so many strong players, which was not expected by most players, and making it so far in the event, almost making it to the candidates. And even the people that even the players that ended up in the very end, it was maybe unexpected for many of the people that they were able to qualify, and not some of the more established super grandmasters like Maxime Vachier-Lagrave and those players who were knocked out. For example, Maxime Vachier-Lagrave was knocked out by Grebnev, which I certainly also did not expect. So the World Cup overall is a very special event. I even thought about if it would make sense for FIDE, for example, or even other tournament organizers to organize some more knockout events, like especially in state championships, like in Poland, for example. I believe that they have a knockout format, and overall it's a very exciting format for the viewers, in my opinion. I'm curious what you guys think about it, but this KO format seems like a very cool thing overall, and it's sort of a shame that it only happens every 2 years. But on the other hand, it's also a nice thing then, because you're always super excited for the event that it starts again in 2 years. So I don't know if we should keep it like that in the chess community, that we have this event every 2 years and everyone is always happy to watch it, or if we should start implementing a couple more of them. Anyway, I'm curious what you guys think about it. I hope you enjoyed this small breakdown of the World Cup and my opinions and all of that. Thank you for watching, and I'm going to see you guys soon.